Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And we were, talking about the preconscious and the unconscious, and we're going to take up on that a little bit more. Freud viewed repression as an attempt to ward off the psychic pains of anxiety caused by constantly suppressing either the id or the superego. Remember we talked about that. The id's the, impulsive guy, and the superego is like the holy guy, and the ego is trying to balance these two guys out. And sometimes, if you're getting a lot of pressure from one or the other, that causes you some cognizant dissonance, and, you can get a little dysfunctional. Anxiety is a core element of psychoanalytic theory. So, anxiety was kind of the stepping stone there. Like, why are these people like this? Why are they so anxious, about everything? It's just not right. Freud distinguished three types of anxiety. One, reality, caused by real and present danger, which we all have in that, situation. Number two, neurotic, caused by uncontrollable id impulses that would lead to punishment. And number three, moral, caused by conflicts between a proposed action and the individual's superego. And that's sometimes the one I have problems with. When people suggest I do something, it's like, well, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. Or I don't want to get in trouble for that, so no, I'm not going to do that for you. So yeah, that's kind of where mine, comes in. Is I have a pretty good superego, because I want to be a good person and an intelligent person and a decent person, loving person. So sometimes, I get the screech moment where somebody's like, hey, dude, well, why don't we do this? Or, whoa, no. So, everyone, some people have too much id. Some people are very impulsive, and, they want to do what feels good. And, so... To avoid feeling anxiety of any type, he theorized people developed defense mechanisms. And I'm sure we've heard in pop psychology all about your defense mechanisms. But, that's how they start out, is to keep you balanced and healthy. But over time, sometimes they become a problem in your life because they no longer suit you, or they've gone kind of in overdrive and cause you more problems than they are defending you. A way of protecting their egos by irrational methods is repression being one of them he identified. The major defense mechanisms are, and some people do repress. I repressed stuff for years. There are people who do repress stuff because it's just too much. You're on overload. It's like, we're gonna repress this and deal with this at a later date. And unfortunately, your brain will do that when it thinks, okay, we're good now, we're gonna bring this up, and then you crash. And so projection, imagining that other people feel the way you feel. Now, I know a woman who's like this. She assumes everybody is a thief and liar because she is a thief and liar. So, displacement, directing your feelings, especially anger, toward a substitute object, now not towards the thing or person that has made you angry. And a lot of men are guilty of this, they're unhappy with their mothers, so they, abuse their wives and yell at their wives. They're unhappy with work, so they come home and yell at the wives and kids. And, unfortunately, women do that too, but, that's usually designated as a male defense mechanism. Oh my gosh, I'm trying not to sneeze. It's not going to work. I feel it coming. Allergies. Denial. Pretending that there is nothing wrong and ignoring the problem. I know some people who are in that too. They're going to deny, everything's good, everything's fine. No, it ain't like that, Reaction formation. Expressing a feeling opposite to what you really feel. And there's some people-pleasing women who do this a lot too. Because a lot of women are raised as people pleasers, and so that's a bad one that we women especially get into. Rationalization, justifying your behavior and emotion on some logical grounds. And some people do that a lot, and that's not always true, as we know. Intellectualization, refraining from emotional involvement, maintaining your objectivity. And I do that a lot. I'm like, well, they might have had a reason, they might have done it this, they might be feeling this way, they might be doing this, and so I'll rationalize it out, and then usually I'll just be like, okay, well, it's their problem, not mine, I'm just gonna move on, live my life, let them live their life, if that's how they want to be, let them do it, I don't care. And repression, burying the problem in your unconscious and forgetting it. Like I said, victims of, child abuse, molestation, that a lot of them repress that stuff because they don't have the tools and skills as a child to process that, so it goes boop back into the memory bank for processing later when they have the ability to do that. The stages of psychosexual development. The three-faceted personality and the levels of consciousness work in concert with one another in major theory advanced by Freud. The idea that the personality is also formed by growing through a series of 5 developmental stages based on sexual impulses. See, that's Freud was into that, man. With each level centering on gratification from a particular bodily area. In each stage, the child must find a compromise between its own desire for gratification and society's desire to instill appropriate behavior, because that is important in society. This represents the insoluble conflict between the id and the superego. So poor ego is working overtime trying to balance, the impulsive and the righteous life. The idea that sexual drives motivate the behavior of very young children was at first not well received by Victorian Europe. If you can imagine, the Victorians, how shocking, Quite the opposite. Freud was actually trying to suggest that infant pleasure, such as that derived from feeding, had the same libidinal base as adult sexual pleasure. And, he might have been a little off on that one. But, there are some things where he was kind of right on. Furthermore, he was convinced that adult sexuality did not suddenly appear at adolescence, but rather that it developed slowly as the child's body matured. The stages Freud identified were an attempt to trace this psychosexual development. However, the public viewed such theories as an affront to society. Like I say, if you can imagine the Victorian England, folks and, Austrian folks, the people of the area, I'm sure we've all watched Victorian era type movies and shows and things where, they're very proper and, prim, and, that would have been just shocking. I could see the women, swooning now that, that was even a thing. The oral stage. According to Freud, stimulation around the mouth and what gratifies the id impulses during infancy from birth to approximately 1 year or whenever weaning begins. Therefore, anything that a baby eats satisfies not just hunger and nutritional needs, but the libido as well. This is also true of everything else babies try to put in their mouths, which is pretty much everything. Infants seem to derive a lot of pleasure from sucking on such non-nutritional objects as teething rings, rubber nipples, and other kinds of toys. When weaning babies, however, the infant faces the first confrontation between its own desires to continue sucking and those of society to start drinking from a glass. Now, as far as I've heard other studies, where it talks about it's the closeness to the mother, that it's not the sucking itself, but it is held and rocked and, feels the warmth and the heartbeat of the mama. And when mama starts trying to take that away, the child is afraid that they are not loved as much anymore. They have just that feeling. They can't express that. They probably don't have words yet. But they feel like, oh, now she's taking that away. She's taking that love away from me. So, Freud kind of went his own direction with it. But there are other developmental psychologists who have put it into a more logical perspective of, mommy's holding me all the time, rocking me and loving me and feeding me. And then suddenly that becomes different. She's not doing that. She's making me want to take this bottle. She's not holding me close to her. And that is a, concerning thing for a baby. The same thing happens to thumb-sucking children. The anal stage, as its name suggests, in this stage the child receives pleasure from the bodily sensations associated with control over bowel movements. It is at this point that toilet training begins, a process Freud considered another crucial turning point. And in males especially, we know they have, the gland in the anal area, the, prostrate gland, which they say feels good when it's stimulated. So, males have a more fixated stage at this stage. The second confrontation between the child's desires and those of society. So again, it might be easier to potty train a girl than it is a boy. So Freud thought that the ego could experience anxiety from these early conflicts, and that, if the anxiety level were high enough, fixation could result. So again, his theory was if any of these stages goes wrong, you're fixated on that stage, and that's going to cause you dysfunctions later in life. The phallic stage. At about age 3, Freud thought a child's interest shifted this time to the genitals. This stage is characterized by a sort of sexual narcissism. And don't be giggling. The child is absorbed with discovering the pleasurable feelings that can be derived from stroking and handling its own body, especially through masturbation. Freud suggested, don't giggle, that this stage is very important for the proper development of a sense of an independent self. So, when well-meaning folks are saying you shouldn't be masturbating, they're actually kind of inhibiting the child's development. So, that might sound awful. But, tell your child not to do it is not the best route. Now, they're going to do it, so you might suggest to them that is a very private thing, and it should only be done when they are alone, such as like maybe in the bathroom with the door shut and locked, or, when they're alone, in bed under the covers when no one else is around, there should be appropriate timing in place for such an action. But here again, society can intervene, saying, as it has in the past, that masturbation is not appropriate or moral behavior, because there are moral sections that believe you shouldn't do that. My father, someone I know, said when he was growing up, you were told if you did that was a sin. So, this stage was the arena for several other unique ideas. Freud believed that all children at this level have an incestuous urge to get rid of their same-sex parent and to take that parent's place. And I know that's true because I've raised kids and I've seen people raising kids. And at some point, little kids will be pretty upfront and say they want to marry mom or want to marry dad when they grow up. So, this arouses castration anxiety in boys, the belief that the father will seek, oh my gosh, I'm going to try to not sneeze, Oh my gosh. Seek revenge by cutting off the child's penis. Now, that's kind of an out there thing. Maybe that's what Freud was concerned about. But, you know, the guilt and fear associated by this situation is termed the Oedipal complex, after King Oedipus of Greece in his mythology. Separated at birth from his natural parents, he later killed his father and married his mother, all without knowing their true relationship. So, you know, it's not really accurate, because, you know, he didn't know that was his mom, so that they just termed it that, but, you know, that wouldn't be specifically accurate in that case. The feminine counterpart of the syndrome was called the Electra complex. Freud also thought that girls experience penis envy. I can say that's not true for me. You know, seems like that thing is getting hurt a lot and having problems. You know, I'm all tucked in. I'm fine with that. So, you know, this makes their desire to take over the wife-mother role even stronger, which again makes no sense really, because they then have the penis vicariously through the husband. So I don't think Freud understood quite as much, you know, as modern day folks do about sexuality, because you know, it's not our desire to have that. There's another deal there. He didn't know about the clitoris and, you know, G-spot or anything like that. So, you know, that was his theory of the day. The latency stage. Freud theorized that from the ages of 6 to 12, the id impulses seem to be dormant. In fact, he hypothesized that children at this level are essentially asexual. He believed that the fear of revenge aroused by their incestuous desires is so strong that prevents them from showing any kind of sexual expression. During this period, the major involvement is with mastering other areas such as social skills and learning. And really, it's just that children, you know, toddlers are exploring their environment, all of their environment. But once you get to be a child, you're in school, you're trying to make friends, you know, and, you know, have experiences in life. So that old stuff kind of goes away until later on when it comes back. During latency, both sexes eventually resolve the problem of incestuous urges by identifying with the same-sex parent. The child should at this time incorporate that parent's sexual orientation and may even take on the parent's mannerisms, walking the same way, for instance, or doing whatever they see the parent doing, you know, helping out, you know, baking or something like that for girls, and, you know, out tinkering with cars for boys. That's, you know, just something that happens, you know, and as a mom, you might feel weird about that. It's like, oh, now they're all out there. They used to help me and talk to me, but, you know, dads, same thing. Girls might have been out there with you, and then suddenly they're interested in, you know, doing their hair and, you know, putting on jewelry and stuff like that. So don't feel bad when that happens. It's just a natural part of life. Simultaneously, the morals and standards of the parent that are absorbed will help the child to build a super ego. So that's why it's important to teach your children the difference between right and wrong, how to be a good person, that, you know, how to be an intelligent person, a loving person, a decent person, versus all these other things that you can teach them, like how to be bad and ignorant and hateful and, you know, indecent. So, you know, because little children learn what they live. There's a whole big poem about that. I'm not going to go into it, but there is. And then that's true. Children do learn what they live. So, you know, the old do as I say, not as I do is not going to work. You need to be a model for those children so that they can internalize those morals, so that when they grow up, they can be a decent person and not, you know, follow the world into hell. So, The genital stage, when the child enters puberty, the fifth and final stage has been reached. The narcissistic tendencies of earlier stages end, and adolescents begin to view other people as individuals with their own needs. Now, that is how that normally happens. There are folks who don't get their needs met from that beginning stage to this stage. Those people can become narcissistic sociopaths. They don't see other people as individuals with their own wants and needs. They only see their own little 3 feet square. It's all about them. Other people are something to use to get what they want out of life. They never develop beyond that point, which is sad. But there's a lot of folks like that out in the world, and it's disconcerting, to say the least. In addition, the id reawakens through puberty, emerges with the newfound altruistic love to become mature sexuality. And again, some people never do that. There's a lot of folks running around just acting like animals, trying to get whatever they can get, get a leg up or whatever you want to say. They never achieve mature sexuality because they never have love for anyone else other than themselves. So, by this, Freud meant not just a healthy heterosexual desire, but also other typically adult aspects, such as responsibility and independence. Because you are responsible for your own actions, and anything else you take on is a responsibility. You're supposed to be yourself. There are a lot of codependent people, and it's their little group, and they have no independent life. It's all about this, and that's not healthy mentally for you. But unfortunately, that has been a tradition in some sects of society, that is not good for your personal development, unfortunately. But in some areas of society, that is touted as this is your job to be, the nurturing, taking care of it while we go have our lives and be independent folks. But you're not allowed to do that, that's crazy. But unfortunately, sometimes a lot of women fall into there, where they don't get to be their individual selves. They just have to be the, person who does everything for everybody. And that's expected while the men go out and have their own individual lives. And that's not cool, and it's not mentally healthy for you. Psychodynamics and psychopathology. Freud's psychoanalytic theory of the development of abnormal behavior is based on the belief that the 3 parts of the mind, id, ego, and superego, are not balanced. Because sometimes they're not. And everybody's different. And nature and nurture play a part in that. When the id is in control, the gratification of any and every desire is the core of the person's existence. And we all have met people like that. Very impulsive, want what they want. I'm going to get what I want no matter what. That's the sign of a too inflated id. Alternatively, when the superego is in control, the ego exerts all its powers to suppress the id's desires, and ego defense mechanisms begin to obstruct normal functioning. And some might argue that saints, with their superego, are out of balance because they're doing, for everybody and everything, and what they think is the moral, height, and not having a life of their own. So, the ego is the weak link. It is also what keeps the individual attuned to the real world. So the ego is trying to balance all this stuff out. That's its job. So when you hear people talk about the ego, again, that's pop psychology. They don't know what they're talking about because the ego is the guy in the middle. The id is actually the guy who's full of himself, and the superego is trying to be good. To achieve the highest moral standard. The ego in the middle, he's just trying to balance this stuff out. He's just like, oh man, so. Therefore, as the ego loses strength, contact with reality gets equally weak. So, if you're overwhelmed to one side or the other, the ego's just like, I can't deal with this. The final collapse of the ego the complete loss of contact with reality, Freud termed psychosis. Because, psychotic people, they're kind of out there. They, everything is what they want, and sometimes what they want, there's no inhibitions, even if that includes, I'm going to kill you because you said this or did this, or I want what you got, or whatever. That's where psychosis comes in, is when the id is just all up in the control, and the ego is just like, can't do nothing about this. How does the personality get off balance? Freud claimed that this could happen in either of two ways. First, some highly traumatic incident, such as experiencing a horrible plane crash. And I'm sure Freud did not say that because there weren't planes in his day. So, this is what our folks who, wrote this textbook put in there. But anyway, or an earthquake could put so much stress on the person, a natural disaster, that the ego loses control. And that could be, and it's, like I said, in some childhood trauma where children are beaten really bad, or raped or whatever, they can't process that, and the way they might deal with that is they want whatever they want. It's all about meeting their perceived needs. They repress that, and they just know they have a hole they want, and it is like in charge. And so it's an insatiable thing. Like, they teach you when you do self inner child work is like nothing can fix that but you. No matter how much money you get, ain't gonna fix that. No matter how much stuff you get, ain't gonna fix that. No matter how much you eat, ain't gonna fix that. No matter how much you try to love people, ain't gonna fix that. What you gotta do is you gotta heal that, take out your garbage, heal that in you, so that you can be a balanced person. Second, and much more likely to occur, was that the personality had developed incorrectly. That some great disturbance in an early psychosexual stage, or now we would say in any developmental stage, that is pre-genital, has left its mark by tilting the power balance in a certain direction. So, there's been a lot of studies on, developmental stages of children and trauma, where like if a child is, in a certain stage and they experience a trauma, then they might kind of not finish developing in that stage, or they might get stuck in that stage. And there are people that I have met, through my work, that they are definitely stuck in a low stage. And the more you study human development, you can talk to people and you start clocking their mental age, your emotional age. And there's some folks that, we're looking at toddlers that are grown people. We're looking at people who are 8 years old. We're looking at people who are 13 years old who are grown people. But emotionally and mentally, that's where they're stuck. And of course, if you was to go tell them that, they're going to be like, well, yeah, you're mean or whatever. Because so you kind of just have to keep that to yourself. I had a friend who's a counselor, and that's what they say. It's an occupational habit. Once you learn this stuff, you start seeing this stuff. And you might want to tell everyone what you're seeing, but then you're going to have a lot of people that aren't going to like you because you're telling them what you're seeing. So, you have to keep a balance between your professional life and your personal life, where you're not telling everybody what their problem is, because, that most people who don't want to know what their problem is might not take that so well. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program. And that's what this is, an educational program. It's not designed to diagnose or treat any mental illness. If anything I said triggered you, or you think is a problem in your life, then by all means, please go and talk to your mental health professional. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.